Cafe. My name is Freddie Ndimule. Flora, yesterday I told you it wasn't going to rain. Did it?
And I just remembered that when I was on my way to work, and I'm like, I'm glad I didn't put any money on it.
You see? Now I'll tell you today, it is not going to rain at all today. Zero chance of precipitation, 0%.
I trust you.
Today the sun will be up and shining in Nairobi. So no need to carry your brollies or umbrellas. Highs of 26 degrees Celsius, lows of 15 degrees Celsius. We're beyond that already. It's 6 a.m. So I think by now it should be around 20, 21 degrees Celsius. 18 days to Christmas, and I tell you, Christmas itafika ikupata ujanini. Fuata hii countdown. Yes, a lot more coming up later.
Yeah, and of course, there's the Youth Connect Summit that kicks off today, but officially will be open tomorrow all the way to Tuesday. Just matters innovation and leadership when it comes to matters youth. And of course, Man United fans will not give us peace this week, starting with our director, Emmanuel there.
You know, beating Chelsea is no longer something to brag about.
I know.
Chelsea you deserves pity. To be honest, you should not be seen to be bragging about beating Chelsea.
But it has been a rough patch for Manchester United fans.
Meanwhile, Arsenal is at least 9 points clear of Manchester United on the log. And either way, a win is a win, 3 points clear. So yes, 36 points, I think, against the second person is Liverpool.
Yes.
Even Man City is struggling.
Absolutely.
So what were Manchester? Whichever side of Manchester, please, come slowly.
Okay, we'll allow you to celebrate the small win, yes? But yes, welcome to this edition of Morning Cafe at TV47 News on X, at TV47 Kenya on Facebook. That's how you interact with us. The hashtag is Morning Cafe. I'm Flora Limuke. To have a look at what to expect on the diary this morning.
Yes.
Of course, Youth Connect Summit, the big, what we're following up on today. And of course, it kickstarts for the next, starting from 8th all the way to 12th. And it will be hosted by the government of Kenya in partnership with Youth Connect Africa Hub and the UNDP. And this is the 6th edition of the Youth Connect Africa Summit, that expects to convene over 20,000 young people, government officials, corporate leaders, and development. And the main aim to spotlight youth leadership and innovation for Africa's integration through policy discussions, among other high-level meetings. Also today, expect the Kenya Power and Lightning to be launching a 5-year corporate strategic plan at the Bomas of Kenya, and the Principal Secretary, State Department for Energy, Alex Washira, will be the guest there. Away from that, in the Senate Committee on Health is scheduled to hold a meeting with this morning, and the purpose of the sitting is to meet with the CS for Ministry of Health, the Chairperson Health Committee, Council of Governors, the Chief Executive Officer, National Health Insurance Fund, that is NHIF, the CEO KMPDC, the Chairperson for RUFA, and the Chairperson for Christian Health Association of Kenya. And yes, that is what will be happening in the Senate. Away from that, in politics, the NAC Kenya party leader, Martha Karua, will be issuing her feedback on the National Dialogue Committee report and the state of the nation. And yes, those are just some of the activities and news that we expect to be developing as the day goes on.
All right, I think we should go straight to the dailies now, and we'll take a look at the top stories later on. Let's start off with the Standard. And on the Standard, the big headline, Ruto amasses power. That's the big headline on the Standard today. Chief of Staff Felix Koskei to wield unparalleled authority should a bill to Parliament sail through. The president wants his Mr. Fix-It to, among other things, be the custodian of the government seal domiciled at the Attorney General's office. This story is on page 2 of the Standard. And the other big story on the front page of the Standard, Raila tendering wars at ministry behind KCPE errors. Opposition leaders joined calls for a review of this year's primary school final exams, saying the results are not a true reflection of the tests. This story extensively covered on pages 6 and 7 of the Standard. And Raila claims that grades in science, social studies and religious studies were truncated. The rollout saw KCPE candidates get graded in subjects they never sat for, and that the system deployed could not produce the plus and minus signs. Wow. That is a big talking point. The other big story on the front page, Kenya to lead food initiative in Commonwealth. Kenya has been picked to spearhead climate resilient agriculture for food security across 56 Commonwealth countries. Matters to, I think, coming from the COP28. On the real estate pullout, debts lift lead on safety lapses at construction sites. And the other highlights on the top strip of the Standard this morning, CBK Governor Ndongo says we have no money for CDF or salaries. You remember members of the National Assembly had gone on a strike this week, demanding for the release of the funds. And
they're starting their recess today, so I'm wondering if they want to extend.
They need to approve that motion for adjournment.
Yeah.
If at all they can agree on that. The other story, crisis of 54 pregnancies in one school. Wow. On the international scene, Mandela memories 10 years later. And of course, Arsenal, kings of last-minute wins. That story is on page 40. And if you flip over, yes, and that very nice photo of Declan Rice celebrating his goal against Luton with Gabriel. On Tuesday, where Arsenal, the great Arsenal, won 4-3. And Arsenal show fighting spirit with another late winner. Pundits praise Gunners as Rice scores late winner in 4-3 victory over Luton Town. And the win gave Arsenal a 5-point lead at the top of the table. At least by now it's been reduced to 2 points. But then again, in comparison to some smaller team from a rural town called Manchester, at least 9 points difference. 9 points difference.
Before the end of this show, we might not have a director. Let's have a look at the Daily Nation. The top headline there, return of CASs, and governance officials will report to the AG or respective cabinet secretaries. And our new government-sponsored bill is seeking to anchor the position of Chief Administrative Secretary in law as President William Ruto's Kenya Kwanza administration moves to align with the High Court ruling that found the assistant minister post unconstitutional. And this will pave the way for the appointment of 50 CSs, escalating the public wage bill and weighing down already overburdened Kenyan taxpayers. That story there is on page 4 of the Daily Nation this morning. Another big story there, ex-bank boss wanted a hitman to kill wife in US. And yes, Dr. Leonard Thuo Mwithiga, the 52-year-old, had a high-flying career at the Kenya Commercial Bank, where he worked as Group Shared Services Director. A man of few words, he was a calm corporate fixer, friends of former colleagues and told Nation, but beneath the veneer, he had a killer mind. He flew to the US and less than 3 months ago looking for a hitman to kill his wife, with whom they had fallen out, only for the killer to leak the motive to the police. And that is the story on page 3 of the Daily Nation this morning. Another story there on the left strip of the Daily Nation, condemned cooking oil now safe for use, says KEBS. And yes, the Kenya Bureau of Standards clarified that edible oil imported by the Kenya National Training Corporation, KNTC, is safe for consumption. Other stories on the top strip of the Daily Nation, Raila claims tender war behind exams mess as Machogu defense results. And that is the story on page 7, the Daily Nation. And good news for TikTok content creators as subscription model to be launched in Kenya. The story there is on page 2 of the Daily Nation. Other headlines on the right strip of the Daily Nation, MPs divided over Nyakango charges. And while the opposition accused the state of targeting control of budget over her strong stance against misuse of public funds, the government side said she is subject to the law like any other person. And in courts, the Equity Group Chief Executive Officer James Mwangi has told the High Court that he bought a disputed 20-acre piece of land from President Daniel Arap Moi for 300 million shillings in February 2012. That story is on page 6 of the Daily Nation. Samata's technology there. Hackers go after state academia in wave of attacks, and hackers descended heavily on web and mobile applications, targeting the government, academia, and end users of phone apps in the 3 months to September. And yes, let's have a look at the back page of the Daily Nation. Still on that story, KEBS backtracks on coking oil consignment, says it's safe. And just a statement there, however, the sampled edible oils did not meet the vitamin A levels specified in the Kenya standard. This is not a health and safety parameter. That is a statement by the Kenya Bureau of Standards. Away from that, importers of used vehicles bemoan dollar shortage amid rush to beat age limit. And Kenya's age limit on used vehicles is 8, and Kenya only allows the importation of second-hand vehicles that are no more than 8 years old, and there's a plan to revise this to 5 years. Another story there on Matter of Sports, how Kenya's Harambee Starlets drew away 15.3 million shillings windfall with loss to Botswana in Africa Women's Cup of Nations qualifiers. That story there is on page 35 of the Daily Nation. And that's the Daily Nation this morning.
All right, tuangazie gazeti la Taifa Leo. Raila afichua kashfa KCPE. Odinga ataka jopo libuniwe kuangazia dosari baada ya malalamishi kuhusu mtihani. Kinara wa Azimio Raila Odinga jana alidai mzozo kuhusu utoaji wa tenda ya mabilioni ya fedha za kuchapisha mitihani ndio ulichangia kuvurugika kwa matokeo ya mtihani wa darasa la 8 KCPE mwaka huu. Habari kamili kwenye ukurasa wa pili. Vidokezo vingine kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo. Mafuta, KEBS yatoa ushauri wa kutatanisha. Imepiga abautani na kusema mafuta ya kupikia ya KNTC ni salama. Kwingineko, mambo ya burudani. TikTok sasa kulipisha watumiaji. Kampuni ya TikTok imethibitisha itaanzisha mpango wa majaribio kulipisha watumiaji. Habari yenyewe kwenye ukurasa wa pili. Na kuna mzozo kwa bunge wa Kisii wakitetea Nyakango. Viongozi hao waapa kumtetea kisheria, wakisema kuwepo kwa njama ya kisiasa. Tuangazie pale juu kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo. Masuala ya siasa. ODM yakosoa serikali kuhusu mgao wake. ODM yashutumu Kenya Kwanza kwa kupunguza pesa za vyama vya kisiasa kwa hadi milioni 812 ili kulemaza upinzani. Na kwenye spoti, Hotspur Newcastle mawindoni. Ni Newcastle dhidi ya Everton, huku Tottenham wakialika West Ham United. Masuala haya, habari hizi kwenye ukurasa wa 20 wa jarida la Taifa Leo. Na hizo ndizo habari zilizopewa kipaumbele kwenye Taifa Leo hii leo.
Let's have a look at the People Daily this morning. Top headline there's no money for CDF and roads. That is what the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury says. And Treasury CS put to task over late release of funds for bursaries, as his roads counterpart says he can't pay for new infrastructure. Let's just have a look at their numbers. 130 million shillings is what each of all the 290 constituencies get for NG-CDF. They are owed about 37.7 billion shillings. 23 billion shillings is what oil marketers have been paid from 66 billion shillings pending bills, and the balance is in bonds. Also, 155 billion shillings is the amount of pending bills for roads. This is according to Murkomen, who was allocated 46 billion shillings. Another story there on the left strip, banks feel pressures, bad loans keep rising, and 8 of the top 10 lenders have recorded increase in defaults, with only 2 defying the trends. And of course, even this coming after that news there from yesterday that banks will be increasing their rates anytime from now. Other stories there, Raila says tender war to blame for KCPE terrors, and fresh push to bring back CSs ahead of ruling. Those are the stories of the People Daily this morning.
Now that headline on the bringing back of CAS is what features as a top headline on the Star today. Ruto's fresh bid to restore CAS posts. That's a big headline on the Star. Only half of former appointees likely to benefit in line with High Court ruling. There's a new bill tabled in Parliament to regularize positions declared unconstitutional. That's a big story on the front page of the Star. It is a big talking point. And yes, Koffi Olomide is back in Kenya for a Rumba concert. And you see the last time this gentleman was here, I think he got into trouble for a scuffle at the airport and he had to be kicked out. And yes, half of the page of the front page of the Star has been dedicated to photos of this king of Rumba, Koffi Olomide. I'm sure our director Emmanuel must be
very happy,
very elated. Yeah. Yes, but I'll tell you, one day I'll tell you the story about what goes on air while we're live on air. Anyway, other highlights on the front page of the Star. Shock as 10-year-old boy circumcises self in Naivasha. This is on the bottom strip of the Star. Wow.
Whoa.
Elsewhere, Kenyan in USA accused of plot to murder woman. And Miraf farmers live in poverty despite growing acres of crop. The only other headline or highlight on the front page of the Star is on the top strip, and it talks about Raila claiming tender wars at center of KCPE exam mess, same as on the front pages of the other dailies. And that's the Star today.
On the Business Daily, Kenyans on 100,000 pay grows lowest in 5 years. And it's explained there in numbers. And yes, additional 13,131 joined the 100,000 pay grid. However, 3.7% rise last year is the slowest pace since 2018. Other stories on the right strip of the Business Daily: Equity boasts defense buying land from Moi. Other stories there: how new 7 million shillings per year UK immigration rule will hit you. Elsewhere, Poster declares all senior posts vacant. And car buyers rush to beat ATM port regulation. Away from that, 3 companies drop NSE listing plans on Bear. And there's an opinion piece there on the top strip of the Business Daily. Success of Lobito Corridor project could have profound implications if the harmonization of regulation extends to the SADC states, positively impacting the after. And that is a piece by Bitangen Demo on page 5 of the Business Daily. And that's the Business Daily this morning.
All right, tuvuke border sasa. Let's cross over to Uganda and see what's the big story there this morning, and take a look at the Daily Monitor. How plot to overthrow government was uncovered. Now who wants to bother Comrade Museveni? According to this paper, it says investigations over the past 2 months established that in the first week of October, military spies picked intelligence that the army had been infiltrated and some officers paid to recruit peers or conduct espionage. That story is on page 4 of the Daily Monitor today. A plot to overthrow government uncovered. A story there on a picture, an interesting picture there of university graduates, Chambogo graduates, over 10,000. And a photo there of very excited new graduates in their graduation gowns. The other highlights are on the top strip of the Daily Monitor. Government relaxes age for HIV self-test kit users to 17. Matters HIV in Uganda still making it to the front page almost a week after World AIDS Day. And Museveni gives city bus deal to tycoon Katabazi. And those are the big stories in Uganda today, Kampala, Uganda, as highlighted by the Daily Monitor.
Let's cross over to Tanzania. And the top headline there, Ray of Hope at last. Katesh and Gindabi, the 2 townships that bore the brunt of last Sunday's deadly mudslide and flash floods in Hanang district, began showing early signs of recovery yesterday as some businesses reopened and a major cleanup operations was underway. That's a big story on The Citizen, something that has been making headlines throughout this week. Away from that, the top strip of The Citizen, U.S. entrepreneur shares why he chose Tanzania. And in sports, it wasn't easy at all, says Twiga Stars coach. Other stories on The Citizen, the very lower strip, why key international agency needs more cash now than ever. Yes, President persistent global headwinds mean that the International Development Association needs more funds to boost support for vulnerable countries. That is a story on page 2 of The Citizen this morning. Forbes names Samia Africa's second most powerful woman. Yes, and those are the stories on The Citizen this morning.
Tukiangazia jarida la Mwananchi, tukisalia kule Tanzania, habari kuu pale kinachomsubiri Samia Hanang. Waliopoteza ndugu, makazi na wafanyabiashara wapaza sauti kuomba msaada wakisubiri ujio wa kauli kutoka kwa rais. Haya kijiri, serikali ya hamia Hanang. Ni janga la mafuriko kule Hanang ambalo limeua watu takriban 69 kufikia sasa. Rais Samia Suluhu anatarajiwa kuzuru maeneo ya Hanang hii leo. Vidokezo vingine kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi, Mangi Mariale ashinda rufaa, jaji atoa maagizo. Kwingineko, kinacholitikisa soko la samaki kanda ya Ziwa. Habari zaidi, simulizi kutoka mahakamani, washtakiwa walikuja Tabora ni wapatie kinga wasikamatwe. Mambo ya bongo kweli. Pale juu kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi, DP aanza kushusha vifaa bandarini, na hizo ndizo habari zilizopewa kipaumbele kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi hii leo. Masuala ya bongo kule Dar es Salaam, Arusha, na kwingineko, Morogoro na Dodoma kwingine.
And I think that's it for the dailies.
Yes, let's take a look at the cartoons this morning before we come back to the top stories locally. From the TV47 news desk. I'll start off with the one on the Daily Nation, and this is a whistleblower, and he has spilled the beans. The cartoon here is about someone spilling the beans on the 2023 exams, and it's, yes, Raila Odinga in that characteristic Azimio uniform, spilling the beans and blowing the whistle on the 2023 exams, and someone there appears a caricature of the CS for Education, sweating profusely as this beans are spilled.
Interesting one there. And it seems like CS for Education is now joining PS Housing when it comes to matters sweating.
It's not easy.
We are here for all of it. And there's the cartoon on the Standard this morning on page 14. It matters the National Dialogue report, and it shows off goes BBI, in comes NADCO report. And it just that conversation that people have been having, that the National Dialogue Committee is pretty much the return of REGE, that is the Building Bridges Initiative. And there's the DECO 7/2020. Okay, yeah, that is.
Meanwhile, in the trash bin, there's chapter 6. That there are some sections of the Constitution yet to be fully implemented.
Yes.
But now we're just moving from BBI to NADCO report, and I'm sure there'll be some other document that they'll probably come up with in the near future.
Yes. Do we have the one on the People Daily?
Do we have the People Daily cartoon? Oh, yes, and there you have it, Stano's take. Exams in Kenya, matters exams as well. So ballot boxes, one representing exams in Kenya, the other one elections in Kenya. And the Kenyans saying, this is where election rigging and corruption started, in examination. And it is true that our examinations, our national exams have been shrouded in controversy, allegations of cheating for so many years.
Yes.
And that is where corruption really starts in this country. Yeah. So how do you have a system of education that churns out Kenyans through corrupt ways, and you expect that you can fight corruption at the national level? The education system is the basis of how we understand everything in this country. Those are the dailies. Let's take a look at one story as prepared by the TV47 news desk. Now, the national government is facing a cash crunch crisis that has crippled the entire public service due to delay in payment of salaries and the disbursement of the National Government Constituency Development Fund, NG-CDF, causing an uproar in Parliament. National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Professor NG-CDF told MPs that the recent drought and the ongoing El Nino rains have eaten up a huge chunk of the budget amid reduced revenues, leaving the government with empty coffers. Apollo Kamau reports on the liquidity crisis that saw senators storm out of the chambers due to delays in staff salaries.
Share the truth, say kimeumana.
Under pressure from MPs over the delayed disbursement of the National Government Constituency Development Funds, National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Professor NG-CDF dropped a bombshell when he admitted that the government is broke and facing a serious cash crunch that has seen the government struggle to pay salaries.
When I see us, I have known you as a honest and a truthful man. Please share the truth before time catches up with you. Share the truth. Say, kimeumana. Give me time, kidogo. You will be able to sort out the problem.
I can tell you, we are even having trouble with salaries. We are clearing salaries with arrears. Okay? You know, just imagine that. The first thing we can do, and you are familiar with this story, is that we cannot default on external debt because our credibility is going to be ruined. It takes the first charge.
Order, honorable senators.
The government's cash crunch crisis that now threatens to cripple the entire public service also reared its ugly head in the Senate, where senators walked out of the chambers in protest over delayed salaries for parliamentary staff in the last 2 months.
Now, 2 months going, we need about 674 million in both houses and just about 80 million for the Senate. Now, Mr. Speaker, last month, our staff has went without money. I'm aware that the disbursement for October to date has not been done. I'm aware that the Senate oversight has been processed. It's lying in Treasury. Honorable senators, let us proceed with the business of the day. I will take it up. I will take it up as your Speaker.
The National Treasury owes MPs through the NG-CDF a debt of 54 billion shillings, salaries for parliamentary staff in the last 2 months amounting to 674 million shillings. Both of these key reasons why the Finance Committee pushed the CS to come clean on the country's public coffers after Tuesday's walkout by MPs from the chambers, threatening to paralyze government business.
If we go without any CDF money, we are just going to plunge ourselves into a burning fire.
I was even called by the governor in Nairobi County telling me that, look, I'm going to be impeached. What are we going to do? I have not given salaries. You can imagine it's a liquidity issue which is short term, but we are going to get there. We are going to get there very soon.
The CS, who pleaded for more time to sort the delayed disbursement, said the government is in a tight fiscal fix due to the recent drought and the ongoing El Nino rains, amid reduced revenues and debt obligations that have to be met, among them the 305 billion shillings Eurobond, which is due in June, and for which the government has committed to pay 45.8 billion shillings this month. Still, MPs questioned CS Dongo on why the country is facing a cash crunch, yet in 1 week alone, President William Ruto has made expensive trips to COP28 in Dubai and India. The much-awaited disbursement of NG-CDF funds has had MPs on tenterhooks due to pressure from their constituencies amid realities of the moment that the government is broke. Apol Kamau, TV47, from Parliament Buildings.
All right, your government is broke. That's the admission by the CS for Treasury, Professor NG-CDF. We'll be looking at that and other stories, including this revelation by the Azimio leader of tendering wars in the Ministry of Education that could be behind the KCPE errors and the return of CASs. And you wonder where the balance is. If at all you're broke and you're trying to get CSs back, That's the state of the nation, your nation, Kenya. We'll be looking at these and other stories with Professor Fred Ogola after the break, a governance expert, Josphat Kamanya, political analyst, Dr. Juliet Kimemia, political analyst, and Mark Okuru Echakara, transformational leadership and governance expert. Do stand by for that conversation. And also, you can continue interacting with us on social media, on X at TV47 News, and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya. You're watching Morning Cafe. TV47 with me, Fred Indimuli, and your government is broke. That's where we start this discussion. That's the state of the nation. The CS for Treasury yesterday appeared before MPs and laid bare the extent of Kenya's needs in as far as its financial state is concerned. He was answering questions on over the delay of salaries, release of salaries for civil servants, including parliamentary staff. And MPs, of course, were more focused on the delays in disbursement of the NG-CDF. And Njuguna Ndongo says the government is broke. Meanwhile, even as the government is broke, there's a bill introduced in Parliament that could see the return of the chief administrative secretaries that were declared unconstitutional by the government and which, if passed, could blow up the government's wage bill to a great extent. That is the state of the nation today. To help us discuss this morning, we're privileged to have, beginning on my immediate right, Mark Okuru Echakara is a transformational leadership and governance expert. It is your first time on this panel. Karibu sana. It's a pleasure to host you here on TV47.
You're welcome.
Next to Bwana Mark Echakara, we have Professor Fred Ogola, a familiar face on the panel, a governance expert. Karibu sana. It's always a pleasure to have you in studio.
Thank you very much, my brother.
Another familiar face, Josephat Kamanya, political analyst. Karibu sana TV47 leo. As we discuss this, we are hoping one more panelist will be able to join us. But before that, the state of the nation today is not looking so good. And just before we went on air, we were discussing how the headlines are looking more and more worrying. Prof, let's start with you. The government is broke.
Yeah.
But the screaming headline on the front page of the Daily Nation is a return of CASs.
Yes.
What's your take on that?
Yeah, thank you very much, Fred. But before I make my comments, let me just tell you, in spite of what you are seeing on the newspaper, there should be some things that are going to happen well in the country. Maybe sometimes they are not being said. Of course, you know, I'm the leader of Linda Jamii. I want to say we're having a marathon on 16th to start to feel with the people who are broke, for example, victim of Mandamano and the guys who are evicted in Mombasa, the Mavoko thing. Also, there's a very important launch on Monday, on Saturday, of Bottom Line Unique Association, people who know that they are on their own, like this headline shows they are on their own, launching how to do women and youth empowerment using economic model we call Solomonic, which you have seen. So having said that, when you see that the CS saying that the country is broke, and the head of state leaving the country when he was going to Dubai for COP28, and he said now the economy is a good trajectory, we shall start seeing goodies. There's what we call a leadership question. And the leadership question is the government, is there a crisis in government? Crisis in government means that inside the government, there's a crisis internally that people are speaking from different angles, or there's crisis of government. Crisis of government is being broke, isn't it? Crisis of government is the debt issue, is the income ratio, the issues, the currency depreciation. Those issues, unemployment for young people and all that, the economy where there's no money circulation. So that is the crisis of government. Crisis in government means the government itself is too dysfunctional to solve this issue. And I wrote an article on Business Daily on Tuesday addressing that issue.
Is that what you think is happening? That
yes,
there's a lot of dysfunction within
Yes, because the crisis of government means that the government has been put in place should address the issues of unemployment, the issues of cost of living, the issues to do with the, let's talk about the depreciation of the currency, debt issues. Those are the issues of government. Now, when a government sits in status in a let's say, cabinet meeting to address those issues, and the very government is so dysfunctional that they cannot address them. That's why you see Moses Kuria says A, Gachagua says B, CS Treasury says Z, and then the president says this one. So the dysfunctional in the government is a key issue. Remember the president first had said in State House that the ministers knows nothing. Then eventually when they met in South B, when they were having their own retreat, they said, now we are gelling. Now, gelling here means speak the same language, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And now when, after he leaves the country saying we're in the right trajectory, says that, then after saying that, then immediately someone comes and says we are broke. So who should we listen to? Is it the head of state? Should you listen to Moses Kuria, Gachagua, or we should listen to the president? And then to bring it home, there is nothing like the government is broke. That is, I'm an economist, I can tell you. The government is not broke. This government has collected 4.9 trillion, both debt, which is 1.3 trillion, and 3.6 trillion from revenue. The issue is, where have they taken money? My brother, if you have a salary at the end of the month, I'm sure we have just had ours. If you have a salary at the end of the month, and maybe I don't know how much you earn, then you tell your wife on the third day that you are broke. The question is not that you didn't have money. The wife will ask you, so what have you done with the money you have just received as salary? So the question is, the government is collecting revenue. Have you not paid your taxes? Before you receive your salary, your taxes were deducted. House levy is being deducted. The government is deducting even more than we remain with. So where have they taken the money? They have borrowed in the first 1 year more than what Uhuru ever borrowed. So, and there's no any big infrastructure project, if you tell me. Look,
apart from debt repayment.
Expressway was done. This one is not doing expressway. Thika Highway was done. Those are a total of around 500 billion projects done in those 3 mega projects. There's no mega project the government is doing now. Where are they taking money? That's the question. So CS will answer to Parliament, and Parliament needs to wake up, because this Parliament trying to fight over NG-CDF, which is a small issue, while the country is broke, cannot pay salaries. And we'll come to, for me, that's a big issue.
We'll come back to that issue of NG-CDF because it's a whole other debate. But James, Josephat, sorry. Prof says there's crisis in government. We're getting a lot of mixed signals. On one hand, we're told the government is broke. There was an indication that we would be moving towards austerity measures to some extent. We get all these hopeful messages from the leadership that now we are on the correct trajectory. The country is doing much better. The president is seen flying around, almost 45 trips in the months that he's been in power. And it speaks to a lot of confusion. And we may tend to agree with Prof that there is crisis in government. Do you agree?
Well, thanks, Fred, and morning to all our viewers. I think it's clear to everybody now that we are not where we hoped to be as a nation. And now this speaks to, are we doing much better than we hoped, or are we doing worse? Clearly we are leaning to the left. A lot of our anticipation and our projection as a nation, as a state, really as a population of the country, have gone down. Because if you look at the mantra, the issue that we need to address is the economic issue, and that's what Prof is alluding to. Everybody is on a tight budget, including the government. Because one, I think for the first time in a long while, even considering the COVID era, we are falling short as a government of the revenue collection. And what does this mean? It means now the fiscal restructuring and reallocation to projects and public policy has to be revised. Then when you see the issue of CAS coming up, the wage bill is going to be inflated. So it is a balancing scale. We are not doing well. We don't need to mince our words when we are saying this. It's clear to everybody, to every Kenyan, just across the political divide. And the president is doing his best, to my assessment, in trying to woo investors to come and invest in Kenya or fund the government. But then you can only borrow so much. And it takes us back to the previous regime, although I find it a tired argument now to keep on referring to what Uhuru did and what he did not, because when he was... is still there. It's still there, but when Uhuru was in power, I remember, there was a statement that we are losing 2 billion every day. And we used to ask, you're telling us so what? You're the president, take charge. So now we have a new regime, a new administration, or continuity of the same. And the crisis that we're having, it does not help us to keep referring to what we found, an economy that was dilapidated, we did not have enough money, we are not meeting our budget. No, we need to swing into action, because remember, we are halfway through the financial year. In 6 months, we are going into another budget. So we have to be very decisive, even as we try to position ourselves internationally, and that's where I attribute the international trips that the president is making too. Domestically, we need to revamp our economy. We are not doing well. I mean, that is clear. Yes, there is a crisis, and when the person in charge of our budget, of our wallet, says we are broke, I am tempted to listen to him more than to any other person.
Okay.
Because remember, he's the one who will come out again and bill you in a trajectory manner when it comes to the finance bill next year.
Mark A. Chakara, is it a communications problem that we see the president saying we're doing well, I'm going out there, I'll bring goodies, and we see the CS saying something totally different, we are totally broke, we're not even able to pay salaries, yet we see the behavior of government and what they're saying is not aligning? That on one hand you say we don't have money, but the actions that you take indicate something else. Is it a communication issue?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here today. I don't think it's a communication problem. And both the people speaking could be saying the truth, most likely speaking the truth. Because the CS, who is in charge of the pass, looks at the wallet, he says, we don't have enough money to do shopping today, you know. But when Mzee Wanyumba says everything is okay, he could be right. Because the one who's in charge of the wallet might not know that Mzee has access to some Fuliza or some Mshwari, you know. And
can enjoy a bottle of beer even when the family is suffering.
Exactly. So they could both be saying the truth, because the president does not only get briefing about the nation as a going concern from the CS Treasury. There are so many other factors that he has to look at that he uses to come to that conclusion, not just what we have in the wallet. Because what we have in the wallet or might not have might be temporal. So I doubt it's a communication problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yes, Prof.
I'm concerned by that statement because if you look at the JD of all CS, apart from, a CS Treasury is a super CS. In fact, that is the only CS where even there's no PS. You see, there's no PS in that ministry because this is a super CS. Even if you're Minister of Land, if you're not signing an agreement with Treasury, you're just wasting time because there's no money that can move from a ministry just because you're a minister. So actually, it is actually the most substantive CS, if you like. And I think that in the JD of the CS is that one of them also they are advisor to the president. And being an advisor to the president, whatever he was even saying there, that should be actually the official position that he could tell the president if he's asked about the state of the economy. Mm-hmm. Remember, Professor Njuguna Ndung'u is not just like any other person. He is a professor of economics. Professor Njuguna Ndung'u is an ex-IMF World Bank economist. He has a reputation for what he says. And maybe what is happening is that he's so competent at telling people the truth, but other guys are politicians. Remember, in the Kenya Kwanza establishment, Professor Njuguna might be the closest to what we'd call a technocrat, as opposed to the Moses Kurias and the other guys. They're more politicians. So I would be concerned if at all he would be telling a nation in parliament, and in fact, you cannot mislead parliament when you have another information. So according to me, in God we trust, the rest bring data. And even to maybe give my other perspective about this, you talked about the issue of 45 trips in a span of 1 year and a few months. Now, let me ask you, Fred, does the president have time to address the domestic issue that he says he's talking about? Mm-hmm. Because look here, how many weeks are there in a year? 52 weeks in a year. If you're outside the country 45 times in a year, you're not in the country, literally. Because, and look, he travels with people who should be working. So according to me, we don't want to bash the president. Maybe it is something that is urgent internationally, but let us tell him as advice, because I've seen people bashing the president saying that you'll fail. I'm not praying for him to fail, Fred, because if he fails, all of us are in trouble. I'm living in this country. This is my country. This is our country.
Are you confident with the direction the country is taking?
The president?
The country.
No, I'm not, because that's why you see me doing a lot of writing. Why I've left my home and my house and my work to come here is again to air the opinion by saying we have the wrong map, trying to look for the Kenyan future. If you have the wrong map to go to Mombasa, most likely you won't. Maybe only by accident that you can follow the wrong map wrongly and get to the right destination, but that's unlikely.
Okay, let me go back to Bwana Chakara, and there's an issue of, that Prof raised about crisis in government. Do you think we're there, that there's a crisis not just of government in as far as what it needs to do and what beleaguers the government currently, but that there is crisis in government in how it's conducting its business?
I can't really say there's crisis in government, but there is definitely, there are signs to problems here and there. And remember that these are people, they are not brothers and sisters. Everybody has their own personality and they project their own personality. Everybody has their own understanding of how they want to do things. And sometimes some of them allow their personalities to come to the fore and to overshadow, you know, the unity of government. But it cannot really say there's a crisis. It's just that there are different things that we can look at before we come to that conclusion. One, I remember Prof has alluded to something else. He said that we have different people within government. They are politicians, and there is something that has been going on, and which might not be good, that everybody wants to market themselves. Everybody wants to brand themselves, as opposed to being one. And it is something that His Excellency has said as much. He himself recognizes that there is need for the cabinet to speak with one voice and to speak for government and not for themselves and their individual ministries, because the individual ministries are part of government. So to me, I go back to the leader of the nation, and that is where I try to get the true north for our nation, whether we are heading the right direction or not. Because some of these individuals who are divisive and might be creating some little storms in teacups can easily be done away with by His Excellency. I believe that the President has the best intentions for our nation, and he's making probably some of the toughest decisions. And in the situation that we are in as a nation, there is need for leadership. And one of the responsibilities of a leader is to make decisions, not just easy decisions. In the place where we are also, there is need for making very, very tough decisions. And one thing that I know, and all of us can attest to, is that President William Samoei Ruto is not one to shy away from making tough decisions. And that is what he's doing right now. And it might look like the nation is not heading the right direction, but we remain hopeful and optimistic. Personally, I'm an optimist.
Okay.
I believe that the decisions that the President is making, in the process of time, we are going to see some changes. Okay. It might not be instant, because all of us are citizens, including Prof here, because you see Prof is addressing the expectations of the electorate and the citizens of the nation, including myself. But at the end of the day, there is always process. Some things might not make sense now, but then eventually when the dust settles and everything becomes clear, and the President looks at his government, sees things that are not right, and people who are frustrating his agenda, most likely we might see some changes in governments.
Are you that hopeful, before we go on a break, Kamanya? Are you that hopeful?
Optimistic I am, but you have to be pragmatic. And I agree with what Chakara says, that, I mean, what he's speaking to actually is the crisis that we are trying to define. Because all hands are not on deck. When you see members of our Kenya Kwanza administration calling out each other. We saw Cherugui picking on Murkomen. You hear Prof saying, Moses Kuria says one thing, then CS says another. It is too early to say that we are doing well, let's take some more time to wait. We were very hopeful. The first year, we were saying, no, let's be patient, let's give the president some time. This is not about the president. I think I would want to be very clear. It is about the leadership of the nation. Much as the buck stops with the president, but then the administration has different functions that are not working or pulling towards the same direction. That is a crisis. And I fear, the way I'm seeing it, if we roll out for one more half an year, then the crisis is going to be bigger. And I don't want to peg our hopes on the president stamping his authority. Because again, remember there is a saying that says dictatorship and despots arise in times of dire need, like what we are going through. But they all know this. What I would want to see work is the structures that the Kenya Kwanza administration will proclaim to want to put in place, so that it will not matter which CS you are, it will not matter which ministry you are heading, it will not matter who the president of the nation is, because we have to, posterity is the one thing we need to work towards to. And I keep saying we need to start aspiring to our ideals politically and how we want to have this country run. I don't want it to be about the president, because again, very soon we'll start castigating him and character assassination as we draw towards the campaign season. And as Chakara says, when you see people pulling towards their own ends, they're trying to position themselves. The campaign is beginning to pick up, which is too early, and it's not serving us as Kenyans in the right way. So I would want to speak more to the structure. I want to be concerned about the CDF, the CAS. When we say we are broke, what is the plan, the recovery plan? How do we cushion every Kenyan? Because right now, it does not matter which political divide you're coming from.
Hold that thought. We'll come back and discuss a lot more, including this demand for CDF, and of which the CS said there's no money for CDF as well. It had almost paralyzed the activities of the Houses of Parliament, especially the National Assembly this week. We'll discuss that and a lot more after the break. You're watching Morning Cafe. Professor Fred Ogola, Josephat Kamanya, and Mark Okuru Echakara, panelists this morning, and he was looking at the state of the nation. Before the break, we were scrutinizing that statement by the CS Treasury when he addressed the members of the National Assembly, and he says the country is basically broke. Now, one of the reasons why the CS was appearing before MPs was the fact that members feel pressed that they're due to go on a 2-month recess, the Christmas break, and the national government CDF funds are yet to be disbursed. And they caused, there was uproar in the National Assembly, and at least on Tuesday or Wednesday, they paralyzed the activities of the National Assembly by blocking members not to enter to pass the motion of adjournment. We still wait to see whether or not they'll be able to do so today. Now, this issue of the CDF is a big talking point. The fact that it is still not properly entrenched in the Constitution. The Supreme Court pronounced, the courts pronounced themselves on this matter. There is another process looking to entrench the same in the law, yet we see that members of the National Assembly appear more concerned about the NG-CDF than the other constitutionally provided roles of oversight, legislation, and representation. And I want us to interrogate that now, Professor. This issue of NG-CDF should be the biggest discussion, that when it comes to roles and the separation of powers, probably the fact that the legislature appears to be overstretching and doing some things that are probably should be retained by the executive could be a weakness in our governance structure and could result in some of this confusion that we now see. Don't you think that probably this is a time to get that right, that we either put it in the law or we do away with it totally?
Yeah, Fred, I've been championing Linda Jami. We have a bill to address the issue of NCDF. But let us first of all look at what was the origin of CDF, because before knowing the origin, you might not understand what is the issue. Remember, before Kibaki, there was no CDF, you know that. What was Moi doing? Every weekend, Moi used to meet with the MPs and give them some money to go to the villages because they had to meet the electorate. That's what was happening. When Kibaki came, an economist, I'm a student of Kibaki very much. In fact, even I used to be, Kibaki is one of the economic and strategic advisor. So Kibaki never understood that language at all. So then MPs went and sat back and agreed that because Kibaki does not understand this meeting before the weekend, because Moi understood it, let's craft the CDF. So that was the origin of it. Now, when that was done, it was supposed to be what is called MP's pocket money. In fact, in live television, the sitting Speaker of National Assembly, Moses Wetangula, said that MPs are village ATM. I'm sure you must have seen that quote somewhere. So now, if that is the issue, then it is a big problem. According to me, the two solutions that can solve Kenyan issue, even talk about national, about leadership issue, is one, decency. Decency means what? As national government, the executive should do their part and be like an executive, and let parliament also just be parliament, which is representation, legislation. Even budget doing process is one of the things they use to sabotage the executive. That should be given to public service and then be taken to the executive. If you are using money and oversighting the use of money, there's a conflict of interest in governance. That's why we are called here governance expert. If we can't see it, then we are not worth our salt. According to me, MPs should just be MPs. Branding a fund is not helpful. But the issue is CDF has had impact on the ground. So which structure should CDF have? Because CDF was supposed, MP was supposed to be a patron of the CDF, not to run it. But the fact that they ran it, there's a problem. I can point out to one of my best friends here called Timothy Bosiri. I used to supervise his thesis in Strathmore University. He did his thesis as a former MP and said the current structure of CDF needs to be changed so that there's more structure for accountability, because for now there's weaknesses in it. So why am I saying so? We did research and found that some constituencies have benefited more from CDF, others have even had zero benefit. Why? Because it depends on the leadership attribute of the MP there rather than the structure and the governance structure of CDF. For me, I would ask the president, these MPs who looks like your friend, they actually will sabotage you, because now remember when they are now even to stop the business of parliament because they are personal interests. The president needs to come and tell them, excuse me, let us get this right. Now that's why Bomas was more about entrenching it in the constitution, but with a structure that's not solving the problem. That's why I even said that the Bomas report, it is as pedestrian as ever, because I didn't see any stroke of genius. People sitting there for weeks and months, eating taxpayers' money, are not addressing such a very serious governance issue. Mm-hmm. In fact, according to me, MPs should go there knowing their work is representation. The reason why we had so many people coming back to parliament in this 13th parliament is because of CDF. Remove CDF, you'll see very few people. In fact, when I was campaigning for MP of Ogenya, I was told, you cannot beat a sitting MP who has CDF money. And that is the perception we had. Why don't we even allow other people to take our leadership? Because once you become an MP with the CDF money, you just distribute it the way you want as pocket money, and there's no real impact. According to me, the MPs know this is a Christmas a gift to them. If they don't get it, they're in trouble. Maybe the CS is being strategic by saying there's no money to actually make them remove their appetite from getting this Christmas package. And maybe if that money, instead of giving them, it takes them development, Kenyans can actually have a Christmas gift.
Yes, and the discussion about having these funds has continued to grow now beyond even the National Assembly. The Senate now wants Senate Oversight Fund. There's already the National Government Affirmative Action Fund, even the MCAs, and it's already in the National Dialogue Committee report that the Ward Development Fund, we are discussing that. These are houses of legislation whose role is already prescribed and described very clearly in the Constitution. Any discussion towards broadening the role of members of legislative houses would be changing the basic structure.
Sure.
That could be something that probably needs a referendum because the funds may be good, but the involvement of the member of the National Assembly in ensuring that this money is spent or how it is spent, that is where the problem is, Mark.
Yeah, that's, I think, one of the biggest problems. If we go back to, I remember Prof has made reference to Kibaki. There is something that Kibaki tried to do to get rid of this dependency syndrome that citizens have. There's always a perception, that's where the problem begins. There's always a perception that the leader, the MP or MCA, is like the one who holds the emergency fund in every village, you know. And it's something just didn't start the other day. It's something that has been ongoing and it has become entrenched in our culture. So that sometimes if an MP doesn't have money, shows up in the village, he sneaks in at night and disappears in the morning. And Kibaki, one thing he tried, I remember him trying to do away with Harambes. Actually, he tried to work that thing out, that culture out, but he didn't quite succeed. So, come CDF, it is probably one of the most difficult things to get rid of. In fact, even to imagine that we can get rid of it is just a mere fantasy. We should not even try to entertain that kind of possibility because the members of parliament, since the CDF was introduced, this is what has made them a bit comfortable to go back to villages without them having to dip into their own personal savings to take care of people's funeral expenses and hospital bills. And the CDF, I think it was deliberately structured in a way that accountability was meant to be at its lowest so that they could use it for now the funerals, which is not part of the CDF purpose. So they make sure they compromise the accountability structure of the CDF. It was to me not by default, it was by design. Mm-hmm. And so even to correct that would still be very difficult because it will still require the same people to change it. So I see it's going to be a difficult thing. But I believe that if we got leaders really who are leaders in the true sense of the word, who are there just to serve, not for their own personal gains, then it might become a reality. But I don't see it changing.
Kamanya, earlier this week there was a bill introduced in Parliament, the Conflict of Interest Bill, that among other things would, if passed, would block the MPs or bar them from discussing their own remuneration. The other thing was on the NG-CDF. It would appear that the government realizes that there is a conflict of interest here already, that you are the one oversighting and implementing.
Yes.
So there's already confusion. Yet, it is a president that used this as a carrot for the members of parliament. In his memorandum to the speakers of parliament, he proposed the entrenchment of this fund. Yeah. Is a president playing politics with members of parliament?
Politics are the order of the day. Any move that is being made is purely political. But my concern with the NG-CDF is in twofold. One, the formula. Remember, the Constitution provides that there shall be 290 constituencies. And to that effect, we have elected MPs to an equal number. And then the allocation of the CDF, everybody gets around 140 million. But the population is not the same. Hence the call for 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling. So that is my number one issue. What formula are we going, even though we may move to entrench it in the Constitution, which I do not support, what formula are we going to use? Because if we do not change the formula, basically what we will be legalizing is taxation without representation. Because we must revise the formula of the CDF and make sure that where the constituency where you come from, if you have around, let's say, 150,000 registered voters, and where he comes from, there are about 70,000 registered voters, you cannot get the same allocation. Because the public policy dictates whatever services the government provides here should also be able to provide on the other end, because MP is an arm of the national government. So my number one issue is the formula. I have an issue with the formula. If you put it in the Constitution as is, it will be a huge crime actually to all taxpayers, because you'll be paying money that will be used elsewhere. And there is no equalization fund when it comes to the CDF. I've not seen it where we say we give 140, but because of hardship, you're going to top it up with 70 or 40, depending on the various needs. The other issue is the rampant misappropriation of the finances, and not just the CDF. Remember also we have the NG-CDF, the GAF, for the women rep, a fund that goes unspoken about. But what is the impact in the community? What is the essence of having all these various funds, and yet there is no defined function per se? Because the MP decides, okay, we can do this police station, we can renovate this primary school, then the governor comes to the same school and says, I'm going to do the ECD classes. Why can we not consolidate our financial structure? If indeed we have the interest of the Kenyans, if indeed we have the interest of having the best of the public policy, I would rather invest all these resources in establishing a structure so that the next regime, whoever comes into office, if he be my MP or Mr. Mark, will be able to effectively utilize the resources that Kenyans are really trying to raise through taxation. Okay. But as is, there are a lot of loopholes. It should not be used as a campaign tool, whereby Prof cannot go and campaign in his own constituency because he's a sitting MP who uses the CDF as a campaign money. Okay. When I hear statements, and I've been a candidate, you know this, that MP cannot go to the ground because CDF money is not yet available. To me, that is a question on the leadership that we have. And finally, yes, we need to differentiate instruments of power. I envy the position of the senator because they purely do now the oversight. The MP needs to be brought back home. Their primary purpose of being in the National Assembly is not about getting some minimum budget to take back to your constituency. It is legislation, oversight, and representation. But there's also the issue of... Kenyans are asking, Fred, finally, why are they so keen to work on the CDF and their salary, but they're not able to come up and discuss the cost of living? Okay.
Prof, yes. And I'll come to you, Mark, shortly, but we appear to be suffering from a crisis, either in comprehension of our Constitution or in ensuring that our Constitution actually aligns with the needs that we have as Kenyans. That even in a governance system, we're not really sure if we got it right. Now we have this House of Parliament whose role is prescribed, but of which we demand more than that of them, that it is the electorate that says we want the MP to do more and implement development at the constituency level, hence the CDF. Is it a conversation that we should be having of changing the structure of governance, generally broaden the role that the MP has to be beyond oversight, representation and legislation, allow them to venture into some things that the executive should be having? Is it the same kind of confusion that we are having even when discussing our understanding of the kind of governance system that we have? That with this minority and vis-a-vis majority in parliament, we don't understand it. We want to introduce a prime minister and the official leader of opposition. It appears that what we want as Kenyans and what the constitution that we promulgated for ourselves is providing for is totally misaligned. Shouldn't that be the conversation now?
I think that we have a leadership crisis in this country, and we've had it for a long time. Unfortunately, truth be said, the challenge for us even sitting on this table, instead of sitting here discussing about these people, we don't need to wait for them forever. We need to emerge. Leadership needs to emerge. We just can't sit back and say they'll sort it out. They won't, because look, we have overrepresentation in this country. China, which is the largest economy in the world, is not overrepresented like we are. When these people campaign, Fred, they give us example of Singapore. Singapore is in the manifesto for Kenya Kwanza, isn't it? It is equally in Azimio manifesto. After the election, they start comparing us with South Sudan. Have you heard when fuel was low, they said, in Tanzania or in Uganda or in DRC, power is not as bad. But when they were campaigning, we need to be Singapore, Japan, Korea. So in Singapore, Singapore has got the lowest tax in the world. Secondly, lowest government expenditure, lowest representation and functioning. For us in Kenya, for example, if you go to Texas, for example, Texas, there's a population around 40-something million people, represented by one governor. In Kenya, nearly the same population with 48 governors, 47 senators. I don't know how many MPs. I don't know how many MCAs. Now, Prime Minister. The current structure of the Constitution, we don't understand. In fact, I'm so disappointed with Azimio, and especially, if you like, NADCO, because they're introducing a position of leader of opposition, isn't it? The current structure of government is parliament is the opposition. And that's why there's minority and majority leader. The person who is actually the official leader of opposition is Opiyo Wandayi. Now, when you bring somebody like Raila Odinga to be leader of opposition, then what is Opiyo Wandayi going to be doing? And then which office is Raila Odinga going to do? And then remember, there's a discussion whether leader of opposition can address parliament or not. Ruto says never. You cannot address parliament. So what I'm trying to say here is that which DPTs, how many DPTs does Raila Odinga need? And these DPTs, what is their role? Even deputy governor role, people don't know exactly what it is. That's why some of them are being caught in some very compromising situations because they have no work. So according to me, if at all we mean well for Kenya, whenever they talk about constitution-making process, for us it is constitution-making process. For them is position-creating process. Any constitutional process being done is always adding positions. Adding positions, adding what's called the recurrent expenditure. Adding recurrent expenditure means reduction in investment in development. Not investing in development increases poverty, increases unemployment, increases inflation, depreciation of the shilling. And whenever a shilling depreciates by one value, Fred, unfortunately, we are adding 40 billion shillings to the debt book without borrowing a single bob. So because President William Ruto took over when the Kenya shilling was 120 to the dollar, now we are doing 157, we have added in our debt book 1.8 trillion without a single borrowing. So for me, it is urgent we address the issues which are affecting Kenyans, and the issues of opposition for MP, whether they have CDF or not, it does not matter. But then the most important thing
Yet it appears it is very important for the Kenyans.
No, you see, the most important thing, Fred, I have a young boy who is 6 years old. When you tell him, don't play with glasses, you have to tell him, but play with balls and avail the ball. So the people of Kenya are actually seeing the need for MPs to have CDF because they are not being given an alternative. So how do you bring development to the local levels? It is county government which was supposed to bring devolution. But for us, we have 3 levels of representation, but 2 levels of government.
My question is it possible to have CDF, the NG-CDF, administered through a different structure away from the houses of representation? Would it still work as effective as because you said right now even any discussion about getting rid of that fund is totally futile?
I think it is possible. You know, remember Prof has alluded to it earlier. about the members of parliament playing the role of patron and not being involved actively in the day-to-day, like micromanaging the fund. That's basically what is going on. I think the biggest thing that we need, because give it to the CDF, when you go to the ground, it's actually one of the fund which is felt by the citizens. And I think the biggest problem that we have to deal with as far as implementation of the CDF is the structure and accountability. Once we deal with the issue of accountability, whatever happens thereafter, we should not really worry about it, because development on the ground, there are many things, funds, the government says, oh, this year we have allocated this, but citizens don't feel it on the ground. But CDF, it goes straight down there and the people feel it. So what we need to address is the issue of the management structure of the CDF and accountability. Once we address the issue of accountability, then it means that it's not prone to abuse. Mm-hmm. And that is the biggest problem that we've had with it, prone to abuse and being used for political purposes by the members of parliament.
Okay, allow me to welcome Dr. Juliet Kimema to the panel. Good morning, Dr. Karibu Sana. Dr. Kimemia is a political analyst and a politician herself. And you found us discussing this issue of NG-CDF. This week, members of the National Assembly went on a strike of sorts and paralyzed operations of the House in protest at the delayed disbursement of the NG-CDF. And we are saying that it would appear that the NG-CDF is key and is probably like the main role of the members of the National Assembly. Yet, when it comes to the Constitution, they should not be anywhere near development money. It should be oversight legislation and representation. Now, when we have a fund that obviously offends the Constitution, yet on the ground, it is what they're saying is perhaps the best thing that happened at the constituency level. Where are we getting it wrong? Are we saying that the Constitution is wrong because NG-CDF is working?
Thank you, Indimuli, and good morning, my fellow panelists. I'm sorry, I've arrived a little bit late. There was, I think there's a graduation at Kasarani.
Oh yes, it is December.
And the whole place is packed with hawkers wearing very many shiny things ready to make a kill. Okay. So there was a lot of traffic around that area, and they ate 10 of my very valuable minutes. And you've just asked me about NG-CDF. NG-CDF is one of the tools of trade for MPs. And it is so conditioned in the minds of the electorate that is the only thing they know. The electorate only look at, is it 36 billion? You know, compared to the bigger budget of close to 3 trillion. So our electorate lack civic education. They do not understand the budget making processes. They do not understand that they need to look at every sector and the funds that are available in every sector, and then demand for development aligned to even the budget, which is program-based. So the way CDF has been socialized is very difficult to do away with. I remember when I was running for office in 2017, one day we were in a panel with aspirants. They were aspiring for MP seats. And what they talked about is CDF. Mukitoa huyo mwenye yako, and you give me, I will make sure I will give you 15,000, bursary. So all the electorate were like, huyo ndio tutachagua, because he promised to be giving us 15,000 as opposed to the current one that is giving us 3,000. And the guys, we were with 2 aspirants, they won. Mm-hmm. The CDF is a tool. It's a tool of trade. So it's very difficult to to bring in issues of rationalization and constitutionalism. It is.
Are you saying? Are you suggesting that we can live with something so at the core of our businesses that obviously offends the Constitution, but we are just okay?
It's very offensive, and it doesn't really serve intended purpose. Because if you look at even the appropriation of the CDF itself, I think to education goes only 15%. It is capped at 15%. But you'll hear an MP talking about giving more than 50% of the CDF to it. So it is very awkward. It is, and in its implementation is unconstitutional. In its ownership, everything about it is chaotic. Yet we saw unity of purpose. Even Kenya Kwanza MPs going on strike because of the delays. So it is an elephant.
Yes, and I want us to move. It is connected to this issue of CDF and the conduct of the National Assembly especially. And just look at generally the performance of the 13th Parliament. It is said that they've ceded a lot of ground or a lot of power to the executive. We've seen the executive even use this CDF as a carrot to control the National Assembly. We've seen that they are more focused on becoming more of a rubber stamp to whatever policy or question or motion or bill that comes from the executive. And now it is showing that there's so much litigation before the courts, and the government now has to fight in the corridors of justice on every single day. Hence the question, what is the role of the legislature? What is the role of Parliament, of the National Assembly? Don't you think that if at all the three arms of government are equal, executive, judiciary, and the legislature, that as we look at it right now, legislature is the weakest link in government?
Yeah, Fred, you saw me live in court. I was the one who slayed the House levy. I'm the one who came out with the issue of non-discrimination. The law should not be applied where there's a right that can discriminate Kenyans. And all the big, short lawyers could not slay anything in the Finance Act, but mine has succeeded because normally when you draft your petition this way, the judges look for other part of the Constitution that can contradict that, then they say it's not an issue. But for me, there's no any section of the Constitution which can say anyone should be discriminated. And when there was, I just looked and found that there's a part of the Finance Act that looked discriminatory, it worked. So I've been in court, I have 26 petitions in court against the government, but not against the president, but just against the things which I don't like. Remember?
Some of which have been passed by houses of parliament.
Yes. So there's a book I think I gave you last week, at that time, called Solomonic Economics. There's a chapter which we illustrate what's called Wisdom of Fools. Wisdom of fools may be that when you are doing something now, you look very wise, but later it has to affect you. Now, when the Finance Act was taken to Parliament, the framing I said was wrong. It was losses for Raila versus Ruto. That if the Finance Act does not pass, it's a loss for Ruto. If it fails, it's a pass for Raila. And that's not the way we frame things. So Parliament should start seeing themselves. They don't understand even their role in this constitution. They are the opposition. So when the government passes something which is wrong, it is them who has lost, not Raila. And then secondly, we told them, Linda Jami wrote a memorandum and told them how if they pass the Finance Act as it is, revenue collection will drop. And with revenue collection dropping is the reason why they are not beginning a CDF now. You see, when they are passing the Finance Act, they never knew they're hurting themselves. Now, the passing of the Finance Act has lowered tax collection. They're being told you can't get CDF. So, how many economists are in Parliament? According to me, William Ruto did a fantastic thing in his campaign. And this is what he did. He introduced what's called economic discussion in campaign. Kenyans were supposed to realize that for the first time they're supposed to elect most economically enlightened MPs, not lawyers. But they have more lawyers, propagandists, isn't it? Artists, call them in parliament, they are not really hard-nosed economists who can actually thorough into it. They are telling you, budget-making process should be moved away from parliament because we tend to elect people who cannot understand the budget-making process. They see it as Ruto's budget. In fact, actually, I don't want the message. Ruto's budget. When you put it Ruto's budget, then those who like Ruto should pass it. Those who don't like it should reject it. It is not Ruto's budget, it's Kenya's budget, where every Kenyan is looking for how will this budget address our issues, cost of living. Ruto's Finance Act, Ruto's Fast Finance Act. No, it's not Ruto's Fast Finance Bill. It is Kenyan's Fast Finance Bill. We look at it as a country. I don't like politics of identity. Wewe ni Kenya kwanza. Sijui wewe ni Azimio. Sijui wewe you. No, this, even if you go, it goes up to your village. They say you are from that clan. When you want to elect somebody for an MP, the politics of identity is a big problem. We should go to politics for governance. So if you ask me, the main problem we are having here is that Parliament didn't know they were shooting themselves in the same foot when they are passing the Finance Act. Okay. It has come now to smell, and now they are trying to fight. Fighting, you had the ballot. You could use the ballot to ensure that there was allocation for NG-CDF, and for the useless allocation, which you didn't want, you remove them. Okay. Over-taxation has reduced the revenue collection. And I told him, the more you raise taxes, because you drive Kenyans below the budget line, when you drive them below the budget line, they have no purchasing power, you'll collect less. Lower the taxes. I can tell the president now, lower the taxes, cut the government expenditure, cut those spending you're doing, you'll realize eventually the economy will wake up and become vibrant.
If only they could listen. But Wanakamanya, from President Ruto's perspective, he must really be impressed by the fact that he has this kind of control over the houses of parliament, especially the National Assembly, which passes a lot of these motions. And he enjoys quite some brilliant control. To be honest, looking at it politically, it's impressive. He enjoys a proper majority. Yet, it has been reduced to a stamping, a house to simply stamp its approval for whatever the president says. That could end up being a liability. We're already seeing it. All these things, the sale of government assets, it is the same parliamentarians that decided to abdicate on their role to scrutinize this process, decided, okay, fine, the president can do it, and the national executive can do it. Now it is in court. Maisha number, the same, now it is in court. Yeah. Housing levy, the Finance Act, now it is in court. Surely, it will end up, these houses of parliament, especially the National Assembly, could end up being the biggest liability for the president.
Well, evidently, there is no, it is clear to everybody, all and sundry, that every president aspires to have control over the different functions of government. Much as we may want to say they're independent and they work in collaboration. And I'll take you back to Kibaki's time. There is a time he had a minority in the assembly, and he was forced to reach out to the opposition. And was that good for the country? Well, only history can tell. But looking at the current administration that we have, yes, the president is trying his best to have his controls, because remember, it's about control and management. But it is not working for the country. And we need to have a serious conversation about... Is
it working for the president?
For the president, it is working because for him...
Yet some of this legislation that goes through parliament without proper scrutiny, they simply stamp their approval, ends up in court.
You know what happens? In time, it will not be he did not do. It will be the court interfered, the court stopped. The buck will stop somewhere. But this is, my point is this. When the president tries to have the majority of the House in his favor, even trying to reach, remember there was the issue of political parties' interference in the bilateral, talks. It is trying to have the country move in one voice. It is trying to have the issues addressed in parliament. Hopefully they will be for the best of the public policy. Empowered, embraced, and driven by all members of the parliament. But now we don't have a dissenting voice, which is necessary. Hence, I still, in a conversation for another day, when we bring in the leader, the position of the leader of the opposition into parliament, what happens to the leader of the minority? when he comes to the parliament, where does he sit? Because remember, there is also the sitting arrangement. What happens to Opio, who we know is a bona fide leader of minority? So all those questions. The other question is, when will we, as the electorate, realize that our vote carries the financial bill? Our vote influences the dissemination of the CDF, the NG-CDF, all these fundings that we see. Our vote gives power to the borrowing capacity of the nation. Because who voted and who did not vote? This crisis we are having, as the Prof says, we have a representation in Parliament that is not what you'd call a representative sample of the electorate. There ought to have been a lot of civic education. Unfortunately, you see, right now, we are not talking about IEBC. We are not talking about the electioneering process. None of that is happening. We are focused on other things, yet what is going to affect and what is affecting us is how we voted. So the president can only work with what he has. Those are the members of parliament we gave him. Largely inadequate, largely incompetent, largely not ideologically driven. So there needs to be a paradigm shift whereby if Juliet is vying, the electorate needs to decide what is the role of the MP and who is the best matched candidate
but
for that.
But Kamanya, we've seen very brilliant members of the National Assembly, people who have very nice ideas. How can we remedy the fact that the House, the National Assembly, and the way it's conducting itself appears to be more simply by approving whatever comes from the executive, that could actually be a problem for us?
I think the biggest problem, we cannot say that the president having majority is a problem. Everywhere, all over the world, the governments will always want to have majority. Why? Because that's the only way they can be able to push their agenda to legitimize whatever legislations that they're able to churn out of the legislature.
Without scrutiny?
No. Now we go back to the role of the legislature. It doesn't mean that when they are on the government side, they cannot scrutinize. Because some of these people, actually, one of the biggest roles they're supposed to play, especially those who are leaders of the House, is to advise the president. You see, nobody has monopoly over ideas or knowledge or understanding of things. They're also supposed to play advisory roles. That's why the president has different advisors on different issues of governance. So the leaders of a majority in both houses are supposed to play advisory roles. Actually, they're supposed to be like the ones liaising between the House and the president. If there is something that has been observed on the floor of the House about a legislation that has been proposed on the floor of the House, and leaders have some reservations on some aspects of that legislation, it is their responsibility to run back to State House and tell His Excellency, this is something we have observed about this, and this is the take.
These are the legal hurdles.
Exactly. These are the possible legal hurdles if we decided to push ahead with this as it is. So those who are supposed to play their advisory roles are not playing their roles. So we can't really blame the president. They have the idea, they say, we think if we go with this, we will get our things done, or things will work for us. But when those with some legal eyes go through the proposed bills and they see the legal hurdles ahead, they give their advice. Those who are leaders of the government at the floor of the House, the leader of the majority, the chief whip or what, they're supposed to advise the president or to advise the executive and say, this bill that you've brought, there's going to be a problem here. If someone was to challenge in court, there are chances that the whole thing will be declared unconstitutional. So those basically advisors are failing. That to me is the biggest problem. And one thing that I've also noticed, one thing that we must all acknowledge is that the attitude of the president towards the judiciary is different this time. He said we will obey court orders. And that's exactly what he's doing. So it goes back to those who advise him. I don't know what the state law office is doing, because the Attorney General is supposed to be the chief legal advisor to government. I don't know whether this is really, besides the legislature, the MPs, an indictment on the state law office.
Does it go back to the same conversation about a crisis in government?
Just a small interjection.
Yes.
Fred, do you know why we're having a challenge in Kenya in many ways? I think that I'm not a very good friend of Miguna, but Miguna once said that you cannot delegate vision, you cannot delegate leadership. You can advise somebody, and their level of apprehension is determined by the level of understanding this advice. So Kibaki had a vision for the country, so you can advise him through that vision. So what is the vision we have for the country now? Look at Kenya Kwanza. Just try to figure out and tell me, what's the vision? The vision was bottom-up, isn't it? Now, is bottom-up a vision? No, it's not. And I've been telling the president as a friend, my brother, you came with this propaganda of bottom-up. That's fine. Every leader normally has a narrative to become head of state. Uhuru had the issue of the Hague. I'm going to the Hague. They are killing me. They are finishing me. And became president. He dropped the thing immediately and started working. When Kibaki came, he did not start talking about things which are destructive. So according to me, you can have a narrative. For example, even if you're trying to get a woman to marry you, you can tell us how wealthy you are. Then once she tells a sweetheart, you know what's happening? This is the truth of the matter. Let's move from here to there. So as far as I'm concerned, the vision for Kenya now, where is it? I talked about the map. The true north for Kenya is Vision 2030. It's right there. It was figured very well. Where are we running away from those pillars? Education was supposed to be at a certain time. When you advise someone who has vision, for example, I want to go to Mombasa, isn't it? You can tell me, Fred, take a bus, isn't it? But if I don't know where I'm going, how do you advise me how to go there? Mm-hmm. So for me, first of all, your advice can only go so far to someone going anywhere. I think, Fred, you are a leader in this country. In fact, we look very highly about you, isn't it? But you mentor people. Someone comes and tells me, Fred, help my career in journalism, isn't it? You tell them, okay, to do journalism, follow X, Y, Z, isn't it? But someone can, Fred, I'm in trouble, help me. So where do you start? You don't know, isn't it? So what do you want in life? So according to me, one, you cannot delegate a vision. If a rabbit was to pass here and you see this rabbit to be white, you can chase it. For us, we can only help you chase it. So even advisors only help you get there. Then lastly, but this is the most important point I have for you. Remember that William Ruto came to government being advised economically, especially by David D. And look at, I do a lot of research about people, even about anything else. David D is an economist who graduated from Rhodes School in Oxford. From there, David D has never run any business, that's one. Two, David D has never advised anyone in government, because when he came from Rhodes, he advised Jaramogi against Moi. Then he advised Raila against Moi. Then he advised Ruto against Uhuru. It is easy to become an economic activist. It's another to turn around the economy. We have people in Kenya, and I can mention some names.
It is not his job to turn around the economy.
Yes, there are many people who have power but no responsibility. What do I mean? Raila Odinga woke up and said, KCC is rotten, isn't it? What's the solution? Mm-hmm. But you talk like that, you're in the headline, but no one will ask you the solution tomorrow, isn't it? William Ruto, as our head of state, is the one who has the responsibility. And according to me,
even
having
when the House of Parliament fails him directly?
No, he has both power and responsibility, because if something goes wrong, we ask him.
Okay.
And that's why, according to me, the advice here is, where are we going as a country? We need to agree and pull together. His word in his State of the Nation address was, let us pull together.
And so I'm still on that question of the conduct of the National Assembly, because it would appear that's where the confusion, the focus on CDF, the fact that they're playing sycophant instead of scrutinizing even activities of the national, of the executive. That is where the problem is, Juliet.
Yeah, that's where the problem is. And I think William Ruto doesn't need advisors, because he has been in that space of power for the last 30 years. Many years as a member of parliament, 5 years as the deputy leader of opposition when they lost to Kibaki, and now the last we can call it 10 years, and now these 5 years, 15 years now as the chief executive of this country. He doesn't need advisors. So what we are seeing is...
Does it need even assistance from the National Assembly?
You see, the National Assembly, those who are sitting in the government side were handpicked by him. They were groomed by him. So what they are doing is actually the left hand of the president. But I'm feeling a bit apprehensive because things are not really working in his favor, because like you have just itemized for us, there are so many in court, and there are very many other issues that are going to come in court. I'm seeing the CASs are coming back through the back door. Somebody will still go to court. The sale of parastatus is in court, and Parliament, in fact, I was very shocked to see that Parliament can allow the executive to sell without their involvement. I think that is the lowest in terms of performance of this National Assembly. And this coming just less than 2 years into office, I'm just foreseeing doom if they continue doing things the way they are doing. Okay. We are headed for a collapse. So we have an extremely weak government side of Parliament. We have an extremely weak opposition side. So the entire House is scoring 20%. Okay, a straight E.
Because of time, I'll give you each an opportunity to give your final remarks, even as you contribute to or respond to what the rest have said. Chaka, I will start with you.
I just wanted to correct something here. Prof made reference to the bottom-up economic transformation agenda as a propaganda. It is not propaganda. Still, our transformation vision and blueprint is 2030. The bottom-up transformation agenda was designed to make sure that the majority who are excluded in the involvement of national development were also brought on board, being helped, being raised, so that they can also participate. It was not propaganda. That was actually the reason for which the Hustler Fund was created, so that the majority who are excluded, the hustlers who are at the bottom, would also be brought on board. So it was not propaganda. Now, that aside, I just want to say that Vision 2030 is still our vision as a nation. In fact, the Secretariat is still there. It's running. So as I bring to a close, I also want to say something. There is nothing wrong with people going to court. It's actually a proof of how vibrant our democracy is, that there are checks and balances. If the executive fails to do its job well, someone will go to court and it will be stopped. And the executive will not continue doing whatever it wants. So it just shows you how vibrant our democracy is. So for me, it's a good thing, really, to be honest. Yeah, so that is it. That's all I have to say for today.
Thank you.
I thank you so much for having me here.
Prof, you go next.
Yeah, of course, I'm an economist. And let me tell you, Mark, with all due respect, I have a lot of respect in the economic angles. IMF, World Bank, European Central Bank, I've held turn around an economy economically. The pigs call it Portugal, P, I, Italy, Greece, G, and Spain. I have done work. I have 14 World Bank certification because of that work. So this is not a joke. It is an achievement which you should be proud of as a fellow Kenyan. But now to tell you the truth, any economic model or any theory has an author, isn't it? Pythagoras' theory was done by Pythagoras, isn't it? Tell me who is the author, who is the publisher of bottom-up economic model. They should have a theory, isn't it? Because even talk about the Keynesian economics is there. Adam Smith is there. Call them. They are economists who are known. Douglas North, institutional theory, is there. Fred Ogola has published a book called Solomonic Economics. Is an author, published by CC Africa. Is a publisher. Bottom Up is published by who? And who is the author? With publishing house. And based on which theory? So that is the truth. So having said that, now you can go back and ask. I've talked to guys in Kenya, and asked them, what this bottom-up, what is it exactly? For me, bottom-up can still work if it means building people from the bottom of the economic spectrum. That's why Linda Jami has partnered with Bottom Line Unique Association, which is looking for how to create jobs for the Kenyans in the lower end of the pyramid. This is true. What is called the lower end of the pyramid has been published by a publisher from India called The Fortune in the Bottom of the Pyramid. That is an economic theory published. But bottom-up is not working. Look at what's happening even in the US with Biden is having challenges when you talk about bottom-up, middle-out. It's not working for him. In fact, Trump might just come over and take over that country if at all he's not careful. So according to me, there's nothing wrong with someone says, I have just discovered this was not going to take me very far. All of us lied to our girlfriend, our age. We lied our ID. We lied our grades, isn't it? In fact, when I was giving my wife now, my real certificates for my grades now, keep them. I told her, don't look inside them because I told her I have A's in everything. We are not A's. We lie to our children that we are A-grade students, parents, that you are the only one failing me. I got A's in everything. We didn't get them. Okay. So once you have told your son, look here, I've been a failure, but I don't want you to be a failure. I learned X, Y, Z, let's go there. So changing a mind of a nation, if the president was to call us and tell us, fellow Kenyans, let's pull together. All these things are wrong. Let us confess as a country. And a nation that confesses, God embraces. Okay. We must confess that there's something we said to get us here, which is not working. Just like Azimio need to confess that the house levy was in there, a house levy was in their manifesto. Mm-hmm. So we have to agree that everyone has to confess. Even me, there's a place I confessed. I went on television saying, Ruto cannot be president, and he's the president. I have to confess. My son told me, son, my daddy, who is the president? I told him that, unfortunately, it is William Ruto. We are to confess everything we said wrong. But now, let's drop the campaign like my brother said. We have to build a nation. People must eat. Let us forget about our differences. Let's pull together with the president because he must succeed. And I end by saying, Kenyans, there's something the state can do for you. But there are some things you can do for yourself. And that's why I echo, again, Bottom Line Unique Association that are coming with initiatives on which you can put bread on the table for our people, create economic jobs for our people, and let the economy grow because the president can't do everything for everybody. Thank you, Prof. Now, Kamanya and Juliet, you only have a minute each at most.
Fair enough, Fred. And I appreciate the ideological conflict you're having. This conversation should have proceeded for a longer time, to be continued. I think I want to speak to every Kenyan, and now largely even to all the Africans. A country is not the presidency. A country is the people. So every decision made by the government, by the private sector, ought to be in the interest of the people. Today, Kenyans are concerned. We have not spoken about the capitation and the decapitation of the school system. And in January, there will be a crisis, something to talk about. We are going into Christmas. Nobody is caring about the holiday. People want to know, how can I feed my family? I'm glad we are safe, but how am I going to survive this whole festive season? We are running on a tight budget. Fuel is going to go up next week. We'll be here talking about
despite global prices going down.
It will still go up.
Yes.
They tried their best last month. This month is going to be worse. So I want to call upon everybody. Let's embrace an ideological, political conversation, because that's the only way out of this economic crisis that we are in.
Finally, or less than a minute.
Less than a minute. You'll not allow me because of the ones I lost at the beginning.
Unfortunately, we're out of time.
Anyway, I want to agree with all my brothers here that it's time we stopped whining and crying and get organized. So me, I'm calling on community to organize. Civil society organizations need to really regroup and reinvent themselves so that the civil society organizations play a complementary role to the government. Private sector also needs to play their role in terms of driving socioeconomic agendas at community level and support government in making life easy and comfortable and livable for the society. We need a healthy society, and all of us must work together. Faith-based organizations, I'm also calling upon them. Let us not now let us stop right now complaining that Ruto is doing this, is doing this, is doing this, because it's not helping us. We have complained for the last 2 years.
Thank you so much.
Let's support the president and the government and work together. And members of parliament, please wake up and be real. Do your work. Oversight.
Mark Okuru Echakara, Josephat Kamanya, and Professor Fred Ogola, our panelists this morning. Thank you so much for your very well-considered opinions on these issues that affect us. And now, as we end the session, let me go to this editorial comment. Recent events surrounding the apparent delayed disbursement of the National Government Constituency Development Fund, NG-CDF, have brought to the light a pressing need for clarity regarding the roles of members of parliament within the context of this debate. As parliamentarians embark on their 2-month Christmas recess, the tumultuous scenes witnessed at Parliament buildings this week, marked by members boycotting House sittings in a demand for the NG-CDF fund disbursement, cannot be overlooked. It is crucial to acknowledge the backdrop against which these actions unfolded. Despite judicial rulings declaring the fund as unconstitutional, members of the National Assembly appear to have found a loophole allowing them to disregard this verdict. Instead, they have chosen to peg their performance on the management of constituency allocations, sidelining their constitutional roles of oversight, representation, and legislation. Central to this debate is the supremacy of the Constitution and the delineation of powers among the executive, legislature, and judiciary. While there are ongoing discussions about enshrining these funds, including the NG-CDF, within the constitutional framework, it is imperative to uphold the constitutional principles until such amendments are made. The issue at hand is not solely about the existence or utilization of the NG-CDF. Rather, it revolves around the conduct of MPs in managing these funds in direct defiance of the law. Now, upholding fidelity to the Constitution must be the paramount consideration when MPs prioritize roles